Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Strack.
Yes.
Trustee Ott. Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren. Trustee Counterman.
Abstain.
Motion carried 5-0-1. Consent agenda is approved. Next item is that we will adjourn as the Lockwood Board of Trustees at 6:32 p.m. and meet with the licensing authority. Consideration of renewal of the Lockwood
The manager wasn't sure if she was gonna be able to make it tonight, but everything was in your packet. There was a question, when they did, the police did the inspection, there was, their books weren't, like the invoices for the wholesalers they purchased from, but she came in and we scanned a bunch in and I shared them with that police officer and stuff, so they're all good to go. They paid their fees, and so I would recommend that you approve the renewal.
I move that we approve the liquor renewal application for Lock Bowie Liquors.
Second. Motion second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Counterman. Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Ott. Trustee Strack.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren.
Yes. 6-0. The license is renewed. So now we will adjourn as the Liquor Licensing Authority at 6:33 and reconvene as the Lockwood Board of Trustees. Next item on the agenda is action item A, the Weld County Sheriff's Contract IGA. Mr. Staney or Ms. Blackson?
The chief isn't here tonight, so you've got me. This is a standard agreement that we've signed year over year with the Weld County Sheriff's Office, basically to jail municipal offenders and to pay them in accordance with statutory rates for jailing municipal offenders. We reviewed the contract. We're comfortable with it. It pretty much follows the prior year's contracts. We only pay for municipal offenders who are in the jail on municipal ordinance violations. So if an offender's in on a county charge or a state charge and a municipal charge, we don't necessarily have to pay. I don't think we pay very much annually out of our budget for any municipal offenders. We don't tend to run too many things through our court other than traffic matters. So,
Mr. Strapp?
I had two. Like you say, it seems like it's probably the same agreement we've had forever. And I was gonna ask you what the cost per day was for an offender, if anybody knew, but
in the agreement, Trustee Strzok, and I'm struggling right now to get my agenda up on my computer, but my recollection is it's somewhere in the $65 a day range. But that's just my recollection, so you can't hold me to it.
the other one was, we provide the bailiff. An officer from here up to there for the hearing, and then he's in charge of transporting that prisoner from building to building, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, when it's a municipal offender, we have to provide our own transportation up to the courts and up to the jail, so. No, they provide the court bailiffs, so I don't know, I think it depends on what is bailiff duties, but the transport is actually on us. And the guy who stands in the back of the courtroom to provide security, which is often referred to as the bailiff, is provided by the county courts system, so. Yeah, we don't do that.
Thank you, that's all.
But it would be bailiffing to bring them to our court, right? To municipal court.
Correct, I'm sorry, the other way, yeah, to hear on a municipal charge. But again, the reason I'm a little confused about it is because we just don't do it very often here, so. We're looking for the dollar amount. They just refer to the statutory rate, but my recollection is that's about $65 a day. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I will entertain a motion. I move to approve the building review.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Strack.
Yes.
Trustee Ott. Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee, or Mayor Lofgren, sorry. Trustee Counterman.
Yes.
Next item is action item B, water resource credit agreement with United Water.
Thank you. Since the last board meeting, we, water resource credit agreement, started to prepare for the close of United to obtain title to the certificates. And
I don't think they're working. At least mine isn't.
all right.
Right?
Okay. So since the last meeting where you approved the agreement, we started to prepare for a closing originally scheduled for the end of this week. And as we were doing that and looking at the closing documents in discussions with United's attorney, it became apparent that one of the stock certificates that you were going to obtain, there was some question about our ability to prove dry up of the historic lands. And so rather than focus on that certificate as the source of about half of your water, we agreed with United that we would replace the water from that certificate with a different certificate. The agreement in a recital, paragraph F, actually called out which certificates was going to be conveyed to the town, and we need to amend that now so that we can put the focus on a different certificate, different shares, which are from a different farm, and for which we do have a strong dry-up covenant. So what we were proposing here is, instead of taking the water from certificate numbers 4016 and 4018, we would take the water from 4117 and 4018, and we would still need 2 shares from certificate 4016. And so that's going to go into just the recital, paragraph F. Because we put it in there and we defined it as the original stock certificates, if you remember, there was 8 additional stock certificates that are being provided sort of as collateral. So all of these definitions just track through the rest of the agreement. That's why we only need to change in paragraph F. Just as an aside, the closing that we were going to have on Friday, we're extending it a little bit. It'll probably go till, we'll close before May 22nd. And that's to give us more time to look through the closing documents, in part because of this change, and partly there's just a lot of title documents for us to review. But we don't need to change the agreement with regard to the closing date. The deadline is July 31, so we'll still get the closing done ahead of that. And again, the only change is paragraph F. So what we're asking you to do is to approve an amendment of this agreement. It was not signed yet by United, and so we don't have I don't believe we have to refer to the original signed agreement and amended agreement. We're just asking you to approve this agreement and sign this one instead of the other one, and then we'll bring this to United for signature, and then we'll use this as the agreement that we go to closing with.
I'm fine with all this. I did have kind of a strange thought. So the 45 acre feet that United is gonna let us use in the United Reservoir for storage,
Yes.
can we drain that 45 feet and then fill it up with free river water as frequently as we want?
Yes, it'll be treated just like the rest of the storage rights that you have. You can put this water in there, you can put Bell Mountain water in there, you can put Free River water under your junior water right, you do whatever you want with it.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the water resource credit agreement for the United Water Sanitation District and Lock Station.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, roll call please.
Trustee Strong.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren. Trustee Counterman. Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is action item C, ordinance number 2019-640, concerning the weight limits on town roads. Ms. John.
Good evening again, Mayor, trustees. we discussed this ordinance at your last board meeting, and I was directed to go back and make some changes to the ordinance. Summarily, what this ordinance does is places weight limits on certain roads within the town. I added certain exemptions, particularly Weld County Road 2, and I believe language as well that makes sure that everyone recognizes that if a truck overweight is being operated on town roads while it's actively providing services, it's exempted, as well as governmental entity vehicles such as school district or fire protection district trucks, and while they are providing service for the benefit of the public, are exempted from that weight limit. So that's what section 1 was changed to accomplish as a result of the conversations we had at the last board meeting. In section 2, if you recall, we had a conversation about speed limits and how under the model traffic code, you have a presumptive speed limit, but you could come into court if you get a ticket under a presumptive speed limit ticket or charge and argue with the judge about why the fact that you were going 10 miles over the speed limit was reasonable and prudent on the day that you were doing it. We're trying to take that uncertainty off the table here and make speed limits absolute within the town. So in conference with the chief, we decided to go ahead and set all speed limits in the town at 25 miles an hour unless posted at a different speed. And the chief would work with the town administrator to determine those streets that make sense based on his knowledge of public safety issues. And then he would be required to post signs in conformance with the model, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which governs what signs look like and their size and their placement, that kind of thing. So that's what subsection 2 does. Subsection 3 addresses an issue that probably brought the most conversation in last week, and that's a provision that says you can't have a truck that weighs 10,000 pounds or more parked on any public right-of-way within the town or in any residentially zoned district, except while that vehicle is there for the purpose of providing service, including, as examples, delivery, pickup, or construction activities. So that's the summary of the ordinance with the changes you asked for after the last board meeting. And it's ready for action unless there's additional amendments somebody would like to see.
Is this, if this goes into effect, is this gonna be retroactive, or about these trucks parked on a residential property?
Well, we've actually always had an ordinance similar to that in place. I don't know if we've been enforcing it or not, but we've always had a restriction on parking of large trucks on residential property.
Semis?
Semis, yeah.
So the ones that are parked there and have been parked there for years, are we gonna ignore that? or-
No, I think for the most part, code enforcement matters like that are usually done on a reactionary basis in town. We don't necessarily go out and look for violations. We wait for a complaint. Is that correct, Chief?
That's right. I'm not sure about, you're talking about the.
About the weight
I know,
limitation.
but the ordinance you were talking about with, that there's already something in place that prohibits that from happening in town. I don't know that we've been able to, that I've seen that one, because I know he's gonna specifically talk about the one over here in the farms. There's two, right? So there's the one that really keeps it parked there all the time. It doesn't seem to leave. And then there's the other one that's doing some sort of business off of County Road 4 with big heavy trucks going in and out, but he doesn't drive on town roads, right, other than County Road 4. And I think this would prohibit those.
So if you recall the conversation we had at the last board meeting, one of the issues that we have that brought this ordinance forward is that the board took action years ago to put in place weight limits on the street and to put in place these restrictions on large semis on residential property. But in our review of town records, we couldn't find an ordinance that was actually executed by the mayor and published. So in some ways, we're cleaning up from an action that had taken place, I think back in like the 2011 timeframe. I don't know. 2011, 2012 timeframe, so a long time ago. And So what I'm trying to tell you is that substantively, we believe this ordinance to have been effective. We just couldn't find the documentation, and we need to have the documentation in order to enforce. And so the policy behind this ordinance is a policy that I believe has been in force in town for a long time. Whether or not they've been enforcing it is, you know, as, probably as the chief said, and largely due to the fact that there probably was no ordinance on the books.
Right. And realistically, that one semi that's parked there has to drive on a town street to get to and from that house, which would make it being there not legal. Even if it was legal to park on his property, he wouldn't be able to actually get it there legally.
But it's parked there permanently.
Well, I think that's a problem with the code there as well. I don't think that you can park that type of thing, that type of object on your property permanently.
You definitely can't if this ordinance, it goes into effect.
I'm confused. Retro or is not retro? Are you gonna?
It's not,
are
it
you
is
gonna-
retro. It's going to go into effect, and everybody has to follow the ordinance.
It's gonna go into effect 30 days after we publish the ordinance, like every other ordinance. But the truth is, the fact that the vehicle was parked there before, he doesn't have the right to continue to park it once this ordinance goes into effect.
Go there and ticket him, or?
We could do that. I don't know that means that we will do that, but that could happen.
You're gonna have an ordinance, but you don't know if you're gonna enforce it.
Well, I don't think that's a fair question. So, it's just like any other rule, law, anything else in the book, there's always discretionary situations that happen. When people are speeding, when there's different things that are all discretionary. A lot of times we don't do anything, we try not to actively insert ourselves into people's lives unless there are people that have a problem with what people are doing, if that makes sense to you.
Right, and so certainly the provisions of this ordinance that govern the limitation on private property are in the nature of a nuisance provision, like stockpiling on your property or stagnant water on your property. And the town has always, as a policy, really enforced those provisions when we get a complaint. So if a complaint comes in about that truck being parked on residential property, then I think the police department would respond to that complaint. But we don't go out and search people's property necessarily for those types of violations. We wait for somebody to make a complaint.
So then that's the policy, that you wait for a complaint.
So you're asking for an absolute answer, and I can't give that to you.
So there could be some exceptions made to this ordinance.
Well, they have, the police, the law enforcement always has prosecutorial discretion. They've always got discretion as to when and when not to prosecute. So for instance, you know, as you're driving down the street, sometimes the guy in front of you speeds right by the cop and doesn't get pulled over, and the cop pulls over the next car. I can't tell you necessarily why, but they don't get everybody every time. They exercise discretion in, really in furtherance of public safety, health, and welfare, right? So if you've got somebody with something on their private property that isn't causing anybody a problem all around, especially something like this, I mean, we'd be more concerned, frankly, about that heavyweight vehicle driving around on town streets, because that affects the integrity of our public property. But if it's on somebody's private property and the neighbors are all okay about it, and we're not gonna open up a case and open up a can of worms if nobody's complaining about it, as a general rule.
So can you eliminate that from the ordinance? That it,
No, we would,
if it's just sitting on the property, that it won't be enforced? That it has to be driven on the road?
no, because if a neighbor starts to complain about that, if that truck sitting on that property starts to attract vermin or children into, you know, the cab, or causes some sort of public nuisance, I wouldn't recommend that you take that language out of there. I mean, if as a policy, you don't want people to park semi-trucks on their property, then you should keep that provision in place, and your officers will exercise their prosecutorial discretion and go out and enforce that when it makes sense to sort of meet those goals of the community. So for instance, if that truck on that private property were to bother you, Gary Counterman, citizen, you can call in a report to the police on that, just as well as you know, Joe Smith, who lives down the street.
So it all hinges on a complaint from someone before there's any action taken.
That's not an absolute answer. I mean, it just can't be absolute. There's no, I can't sit here and tell you that we're not gonna go over and try to enforce that at some point unless we get a complaint about it specifically, because we might. There may be a circumstance that we may. So I don't wanna sit here and try to give you an absolute answer and then not have that go down that road, you know? So, I think that if it's something you're concerned about, then you need to discuss that and find out if that's a portion that you want to eliminate from this ordinance. I mean, that's up to you guys as a board.
Trustee Jeffrey?
Sort of two parts. Chief, first of all, would the process, if there was a concern, would there be an opportunity for them to take corrective action without a citation?
Absolutely. We always work for compliance first, unless it's something that's, you know, really something that you need to take action on right away. We always go for compliance first.
And the reason I bring that up is I'm thinking about friends and neighbors who drive a school bus, and one of the things in the district that's allowed is that they can park the school bus at their home. I think this rule is important. I don't want our roads to get damaged. So I guess my other question is, when something like this is in force, does the communication go out to the government entities so that they're aware of it? School bus drivers, let's say, you know, a fire chief that has a big truck that weighs over 10,000 pounds but lives in our municipality. Like, does that communication go out somewhere so that they're aware of it, so that they can be in compliance?
Not sure I understand the question, but when we adopted these ordinances, we always publish in the newspaper, so to the extent somebody reads the legal notices, which I don't know how many,
And that may be known,
three
like,
people.
given that they're more about compliance and they give them an opportunity to take corrective action.
That circumstance, but yeah, we would try to give them warnings anyway about that. We've had situations where we've had cement trucks or whatever that bring them home, and they'll, right here in the residential areas, you know, and they'll park on their side of their house. We'll let them know that they can't do that, and we'll ask them to move it. I don't remember the last time there's been a citation for something like that. But in this circumstance, I think with the trailer that he's talking about specifically, I don't know that person, but like, it has, that trailer's been there for a long time. Nobody's asked him to move it. I do foresee that if we were to do that, there would be some pushback, right? Because he's been able to do it for as long as he's been able to.
If I have a semi-tractor trailer parked there at my house and it's against the ordinance and it's been passed and all that, then can I come before this board and ask for variance?
There's some variances that you want to see incorporated within the policy and within the ordinance. You need to put them in place now. You can come before the judge if you get a ticket because you don't cooperate when the police first ask you nicely to move your truck, or before they give you a ticket. If you get the ticket, you can come before the judge and you can ask for leniency on a fine. But you can't come and ask the judge to ignore the law that's been adopted by this Board of Trustees and let you keep your truck when the law doesn't have a valve, a relief valve that would allow you to keep it. Right.
Tell you how well that
So
is.
I'm kind of ignorant about this whole situation, but by passing this ordinance, are we picking on one individual in town or not really? And
No individual in town can have a semi-trailer parked on their front yard or in their yard in a residentially zoned district under this ordinance. So I don't think you're picking on people. I mean, it's generally applicable across the jurisdiction. There may be one or two people right now who are in violation of it, and the chief will work with them, I know, to see if we can get them into compliance before we issue anybody a ticket. Because getting fines isn't the goal of these types of provisions. It's always trying to get people into compliance. And unfortunately, sometimes you need the little nudge to get them there.
So I guess what I would foresee, if I can, would be letting that person know that, hey, this ordinance is passed. We're not here to take your trailer away from you or whatever, but this ordinance has passed. I don't know that it would ever be a real problem until the guy down the road or across town parks his semi-trailer on his yard and says, well, that guy's doing it, so I'm gonna do it. So that's when you're asking those questions. There's so many
Well, it starts
variables that
that
can
way.
happen that I can't give an absolute answer to, right?
Thank you.
So how does this affect the guy on 4? He's had his business there for a long time, and he doesn't run any of the semis on our right of way.
You have a business?
Does a lot of welding and repairs.
I don't think there's a business license for him. So I don't know if he has a business.
You know, residentially zoned property?
Complaint.
And he's got, big welding trucks and trucks that would be in violation of this weight ordinance, for sure, he does. But he doesn't use the town roads.
I know.
County Road 4, I mean, it's a town road, but that has the weight, doesn't have the weight restriction on it. So I don't know what he's got going on over at that house.
Trustee Counterman?
Say that there's no weight limit on County Road 4?
That's the truck route. So
Truck
your,
route?
yeah, so your heavy trucks would be forced to go on County Road 4 to go around town, one way or the other. That's
So
correct.
it's different than County Road 2?
No, County Road 2 would be the same. 4, there's the exceptions in there. It's
All of the major county roads were exempted.
4 and 2, and then 6 around to the frontage road, right? So you can get all around town, and 37, all around town without going on the street. So you have a truck route going around town. So you can stay off the residential streets, but still get to one end of town to the other.
Anything else from anyone? Just, no. Okay, seeing nothing else, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-640, an ordinance amending Article 1 of Chapter 8 of the Lockwood Municipal Code concerning amendments to the Model Traffic Code, adding provisions, number 1, governing weight limits for vehicles traveling on town streets, number 2, speed limit on all town streets and roads, and 3, parking and storage of certain heavy motor vehicles on all roads and streets and within residential zoned private property within the town, and repealing ordinances inconsistent herewith.
Got a motion and a second, roll call, please.
Loughlin,
Yes.
trustee Counterman. Trustee Ott. I'm sorry, did you say no? Okay, thanks. Trustee Doherty. Yes. Trustee Strock.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1. Next up is action item D, the contract for engineering services. Mr. Bebeck.
Mayor, at this time, for the record, I am going to recuse myself from this matter.
No, Mr. Bebeck.
Thanks. For the record, the subject of the memo should read, response to RFP number 2019-01, on-call engineering services. I had a typo in here because I was using the same form, so I'm not sure. Just don't want that to be confusing, but basically what this is a request for board action to approve on-call engineering services contract. We put out a request for proposal back in March to explore alternative options for companies, engineering companies essentially, who can provide engineering services or act on behalf of the town as the town engineer. So through the BidNet system, we put out an RFP. 8 companies responded to that RFP. I listed them here for you in the memo so you can see who responded. So I assembled a team of judges, myself, a representative from Ramey Environmental, and a representative from Inertia Engineering. Inertia is currently helping me to do some construction observation. This was a temporary as you remember, the temporary agreement. So the goal of this would also be to whoever gets this contract will take on those responsibility for construction observations. But in addition to that, I've listed and itemized the scope of work so you can see it. We scored all the proposals. We invited 2 finalists. We invited Martin Martin Engineers, and we invited Baseline Engineering for a site visit and an in-person interview. Afterwards, we compiled all the scores, and we felt that Martin Martin is the top bidder in this situation. I would recommend and request approving the contract with that firm. If you have any questions, I invited both 2 individuals from Martin Martin, Bill Willis and Mark Thornborg. In case you do have any questions.
Other comments from anyone for Mr. Buback or for Martin and Martin? Mr. Strock?
This is for Mr. Deebeck. Actually, I'm kind of in favor of the alternate decision on this. For me, I would like to see maybe see Martin and Martin gave us a cost breakdown, a proposal for different fees. I'd like to see that from 1 or 2 of the other companies. I'm sure Martin and Martin is probably the biggest and the best, but they may also be the most expensive. So that would be my reason for being able to do maybe a cost evaluation between maybe the top 3.
They're not the most expensive, actually, but I'd be happy to share that with you. And we looked at that as well during the scoring. You know, we looked at the cost, how much, and what the proposing teams were asked as a separate submittal as part of the RFP is show us your rates and itemize everything that you intend to charge us. So I have those, and I can share those with you for both Baseline, Martin, wherever actually, all of them, if you'd like to see.
Trustee Counterman?
I thought one of the determining factors for making your final decision with the cost was one of the things that you considered. Wasn't that correct?
It was something we looked at, but it's not a disqualifying item. For example, a scenario would be if somebody charges $150 and another firm charges $148. We would look at those things, but ultimately, we look at the overall picture, overall package that's submitted, overall staff that's on that team. And we wouldn't necessarily go for the cheaper outfit, you know, just because it's $2 cheaper per hour, for example. We might go with the more expensive firm based on
How comparable were how comparable were the prices between Martin and Martin and the other finalists? Do you remember?
on top of my head, a few dollars per hour, and I'm not saying that Martin Martin's the more expensive one at all, actually. I think Martin Martin was cheaper in some situations, depending on what technician, what engineer, what specialist was included on that breakdown.
The only other question I had is, I saw they had offered independent ethics opinion from the engineering board.
I don't think that we need to have that in this situation. I think for the record, it might make sense for the board to be aware that Trustee Doherty works for Martin Martin, and that is the reason for him recusing himself. I don't want to speak for him, but maybe if he can nod his head in agreement with me in the back there, and he is. And so Martin Martin, as a result of that issue, offered to provide us with an ethics opinion from the engineering board. But I think in this case, where Trustee Doherty wasn't involved at all in the selection process, is not involved in voting for this decision, and is not even up here at the dais to try to, influence anybody else's decision on this, I don't think we need to have anything further from any ethics board.
Other questions or comments from the board? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the professional services agreement for on-call engineering services between the town of Lock Bowie and Martin Incorporated.
Motion and second, roll call, please.
Trustee Ott. Mayor Lofgren.
Yes.
Ott.
Beck, I trust in your decision.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Counterman.
Motion carries 5-0-1 with trustee Doherty recusing. And he can now come back up, I think, or is there one more? No, yeah. Next item on the agenda is action item E, the 2019 pavement program contract. Mr. Beback.
Much. This is a request for board's action to approve contract for the pavement program, RFP number. I've just copied and pasted essentially the entire project so you can see what the intent of the contract is. Going initially with the budget in mind, and with our estimates, I put this package together, put this out just to see what pricing we'll get. And the intention of the project is to patch County Road 4 from frontage road down to town boundary, slurry seal Lockwood neighborhood, chip seal County Road town boundary, before chip sealing and after patching, we would crack seal County Road 4 and the segments I've listed here. Moving forward, we received 2 bids for this work through BidNet. One was from Vance Brothers and the other one was from A1 Chip Seal. I broke down all the quantities and unit pricing so you can see it. Lower of the 2 firms, both very well qualified firms. Both firms have worked in past for the town. They've done, so I'm familiar with both of them. Vance Brothers came in lower on the bid at $193,031.76, roughly about $50,000 less than what I anticipated. Keeping with that in mind and keeping in mind what we have budgeted for this year, I reached out to them and gave them heads up, and I said, I'm intending to expand your work if you're okay with it, and they're okay with it. So I'm also putting that in here. Back to see kind of what the unit pricing is. Went to Old Town, which is our next neighborhood in sequencing for slurry and crack sealing. So I've added that neighborhood into here, and that amounted between crack sealing and slurry sealing all of Old Town about $90,000. So I just added that to their bid. So you're looking at $1,000 and 281.52, no pennies.
I'd understand that before you do County Road 4, that you're going to patch the holes and the cracks and all that first.
That's right. I didn't list this in sequence. You know, it's just copy and paste from the bid. But the sequence of that would be patch, crack seal all the remaining cracks that were not. Crack seal, then crack seal 37. Yeah, it would be done in correct sequence. Yeah.
Also, I was wondering if there are any plans in the future to do Santee Way, since it's such a long road through the farms? Because I know the other roads in there were sealed a while back.
There's a plan to do all the roads on a 5-year rotation, and about a year ago, so maybe not even that, we purchased the software. I'm working on uploading all the segment conditions of all the roads in town into that program, and we'll forward, we'll we'll target all the roads to be resurfaced or have some type of a treatment done to the maintenance, in terms of maintenance. So to answer your question, yes, eventually. I don't know if that's gonna happen next year or the following year, but yes, it's on. Yeah.
Your extra money?
You know what, that's a good question, and I'm not just talking about Zanti, but when we do this, I kept a little bit of a buffer there, maybe not even $100,000, just in case of emergencies for street-related stuff. But we'll see how it goes. We can add a little bit of this work up. I don't know, we'll see. Maybe not this year, though.
The only reason I'm concerned about it is the cracks in that road never have really been sealed well, and I was just thinking that maybe a coating over it could help.
No, I don't think it is. And I've been almost 2 years with the town, and one thing I've learned is the cracks that we're having in all these roads, it's not really surface, it's actually subsurface issues that, unfortunately, crack sealing does go so far, you know? So some of these cracks have become too wide actually to even crack seal, so we're just cutting them out and just patching.
Trustee Strack?
Thank you.
Sorry, Trustee Strack?
So, two questions. Your recommendation, here says not to exceed, $281,000 roughly. And then on this back page, it says total compensation, not to exceed 283. It's page 33.
It should match whatever the contract says, you know, it is 283. Good catch, I appreciate that. What I know, I'll tell you in a second.
I mean, so why don't we just say not to exceed 285 or something like that? And
Then my other question was about routing the cracks. I've yet to see them do that. I mean, year after year after year, I mean, blow job, that's it. You know, blow and go is all I've ever seen them do. I've never seen them route any of the cracks in the street, so do they actually do that? They don't want to do it? Okay.
I talked about this with both of the vendors, actually. And it's in the bid, and it's if they can perform that, they will, and they say that's something that they choose not to do. And it would be nice if there was 6 bidders and pick and choose, hey, who can do that, for example.
Out of those 6, none of them want to route it anyway. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? You actually addressed my only concern, which was, have we used them in town before and you've been satisfied with their work? Okay. I was gonna say, I've been seeing a lot of our cracks opening back up, but I think you addressed that with the subsurface.
Whoever crack sealed previously, in Berkshire, for example, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, it was not that.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Anything else from anyone? I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the paving service agreement between Vance Brothers Incorporated and Town of Lot 2, not to exceed $285,000.
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Counterman,
Yes?
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Trustee Strack,
Yes.
Trustee Ock, Mayor Lofgren.
Yes, and the motion carries 6-0. Next item is action item F, the Events Committee bylaws.
So just because we have the events committee, they just needed some bylaws, we put them together, kind of worked on it, me, Maureen together, and Steve, and recommend that you approve them unless you have some comments or changes you'd like to see.
Document is entitled Bylaws and Rules because it really encompasses more matters than typical bylaws, which are really sort of governance documents. This attempts to also just sort of set some limits on financial and accounting matters to make sure that the town really has a good involvement and a good handle on the fundraising and the expenditure of funds, so that we can make sure that budgeted events stay within budget, that kind of thing, so.
Are there comments from anyone about the bylaws? Trustee Doherty? Strack?
I'm glad to see that the town has some oversight and transparency in the monies for these events. I think that's important. I think if these volunteers pull this off, it'll be good.
Trustee Jeffrey?
So the committee's limited to up to 7 members, and I just wonder, like, if there shouldn't be some sort of a term, or, because my worry is, as our town continues to grow, we could have somebody move in that's really great at events and has a lot of experience and new ideas, but if we already have a full group and there's no opportunity for them to join, it doesn't feel very accepting or give other people an opportunity to get involved. And I understand we don't have people beating down the door to be part of this at this time, but I also don't want us to sort of run into a situation where there might be people that are interested and it's, you know, become pretty close to accepting or giving an opportunity for new people to participate.
I was gonna say, I think it says 2 years in there, but do we have a way of offsetting those so it isn't the same 2 years for everyone, Maureen?
I'm just looking at the resolution, so you know, you formed this committee by adopting a resolution, and I'm just pulling that up now, that says there are no limits on the number of terms a regular member may serve. So you'd have to amend your resolution forming the committee, I think, if you wanted to add term limits, because we have 2-year terms and no limits on the number of terms. So it seems to me that if somebody's termed out, you're gonna advertise their position, and if you get, I guess part of it is, I've
Is-
been
is
with
it
the
2 years
town
from the
so
date they're-
long now, I know that sometimes we have these committees and we're fighting for people to join them. And so it seems like if you've got a 2-year term but no limits on it, still, when somebody's term is up, we're gonna advertise it for new blood, if you will. And if it feels like somebody better comes along or with some enthusiasm, you can A, increase the size of your committee, because you go up to 7, or you can B, appoint the new guy, if they're interested. But I'm also, I mean, it's your decision, I'm also open to term limits. My experience in this town has been, thank you for serving.
See if I trip over my words somewhere. How do the terms work? Is it 2 years from the date they're appointed?
Yeah, they would get 2 years from the date, so it's kind of a rolling thing. Or,
So, we could do that, it just makes it better if it's, like, from the date that this event committee became effective, that's when a term started, and then every 2 years ends, because it's gonna be very complicated
That's
if
what I
you have
was-
7 committee members, and they all start
but I hear you,
January,
but-
February, March, April, and then you gotta keep track of those. And for record keeping, I don't mean just for record keeping only, but then you have everybody in the same terms, and when you post it, it's always the same time. In my
The only,
opinion,
the only
it'd be the
comment I
same.
would have, Betsy, is you currently have 2 members, if I recall, right? And if some third person comes, okay, 3.
If you have 3, there'll be a
But we can
fourth
go up,
one
they could go
coming.
up to 7 under their resolution. If somebody comes forward next month and wants to volunteer, and you're starting a term in April, I mean,
Right, but their term would still, it's just like them coming onto a board. So, just my opinion, I mean, I get what Maureen's saying. I worked with 33 boards and commissions before, and it is a lot, it's more effective, and people know if they're becoming volunteers, even if there's not something available because a term's not up yet, anybody can volunteer. They may not be a member and be a voting member, but anybody can volunteer, and then it's the same time every year. It's just like a regular board of trustees. I mean, you get appointed, these are the terms, the date they start, but you all can do what you wanna do.
That makes sense to me. I guess what I'm asking is, should we offset them? Should the
You
people
should for
we've
the
appointed-
first, so that they're like, but the hard part is, it's 1 to 7. So then how do you offset if you only have 1?
Or that end in 21 and 3 that end in 22 or something.
Well, you could, if you're gonna start them all the same, that's true, and then when you appoint them, you just appoint them to that vacant position that either ends in 20, whatever. I mean, if you have 2, one's for 2021 and one's for 2022, they can probably pick which one they'd prefer, maybe they only wanna try it out for 1 year. And then going forward, it'd just be every 2 years.
I have a devil's advocate here. We can discuss these bylaws ad infinitum, but we have told the people that they can't do any fundraising till the bylaws are passed. So the problem we have is if we wanna have a July 4th event, we are running very perilously close to not being able to get it done, because then we'll be off for another 2 weeks before we approve the bylaws. So I think at this point, we need to approve the bylaws, and then if we feel like amending them later, do so.
You could say, I'll amend, I want these bylaws with this added or this removed, and if that's all in agreement and that motion passes, we could make those changes and then they would be effective today with those changes. I mean, right, Maureen, is that a potential option? So they have to bring it back again? I mean, if they want, Grant wants it to be, you have to attend.
depending on what the nature of the changes are, because if it affects the resolution, the
Oh, that's right.
underlined.
Right, 'cause I forgot
That's
the
underlying the
resolution
whole
thing.
creation. I'm concerned that this is getting more complicated than it needs to be, frankly. You've got a bunch of volunteers who want to come forward and help you put on events, and we're maybe putting too many difficult parameters around it. And just from this is not legal advice, but just from my history with the town, if you've got dedicated servants of the public who want to come out and help you, we should be making it easy for them.
And it does it's very clearly that you could change that by ordinance or resolution later. So even if you decided you wanted, to change those things, you don't have to do it right now, you can change that resolution, approve that later, we just move, at least these would be completed, and down the road, if you need more members or less members or whatever, it says right here, we could change it by resolution, it'd be easy to do.
Second?
Call, please.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Doherty. Trustee Strack.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren.
Yes.
Trustee Counterman.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1. Next action item is the events MOU. Mr. Young.
MOU that we've discussed before by and between the city of Brighton and the town of Lochbuie. We talked about this MOU at the last board meeting, I believe, and the chief raised the issue of a potential conflict because the town of Lochbuie puts on its own trunk or treat type event every year, and so we didn't want to hold two of them. So we had discussions with Brighton about possible swap-out events, and I believe this new event, this barbecue between, they've been willing to call it a barbecue between neighbors. Brighton and Lochbuie sponsored barbecue on July 18th was the event we traded out in exchange for the trunk or treat, since we're gonna do our own event. But otherwise, this MOU, this memorandum of understanding, is essentially the same one that you saw prior.
Well, is this going to be advertised, these events going to be advertised in the town of Lochbuie?
So the MOU just gives us the ability to advertise it. It doesn't get into the details of how we're gonna do that. I think that's something that we can work with the clerk's office and make sure we get it on the website, and to the extent, we'll put all these events hopefully in the newsletter
Oh,
that's
yeah,
going
sure.
out.
On
Um,
Facebook.
So the website, the newsletter, I think at a minimum, right? And if you have any other ideas. And Brighton will be publicizing them as well. And in their
Publication?
publication, thank you. They will have both their logo and the town of Lochbuie's logo, indicating to whoever they're publicizing to that we're also participating in that event, so.
Anyone else have any questions or concerns? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the memorandum of understanding between the city of Brighton and the town of Lochbuie for the 4 listed events in 2019.
Second.
In a second, roll call, please.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Strack.
No.
Mayor Lofgren.
Yes.
Trustee Counterman.
No?
Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Ott.
Carries 4-2. Next item on the agenda is action item H, the CML Executive Board nomination for Mr. Ott. I think I will let Mr. Ott take the floor.
The CML has executive openings for the board. There's 3 different categories. There's categories of over 250,000. I believe the second one is 10,000 to 250,000. The third one is under 10,000 population. I would be interested in running for the CML Executive Board to be one of the small town representatives. I feel with my experience on the board, my experience here, my experience with taking classes, that I could be of value, input, and asset on the Colorado Executive Committee Board for the CML.
Questions or comments for Mr. Ott? No one? Okay, well, I have some comments, then I'll hop in with mine. I struggled with this a lot. I went back and forth in my own mind over whether I thought we should support this nomination. And what I can say is, what I came down to at the end of the day is, while I respect Mr. Ott as a member of the board, and I have a lot of, I have good personal relationship with Mr. Ott, I don't think we should support this nomination. And let me tell you my 2 big reasons why. The first big reason why is Mr. Ott has been our representative on the policy committee throughout this past year. And that policy committee's objective is to support local control over local issues, local control over statewide issues. One of the things they talked about this year was Senate Bill 181 and oil and gas. And this board has been very vocal in the past, including myself, Mr. Strack, Mr. Morris, about wanting more local control over oil and gas issues for our board. Nonetheless, as our member to the policy committee, Mr. Ott took a vocal position against Senate Bill 181 and against local control over those issues, and that's very concerning to me. Concerning enough that I am not willing to support his nomination to the executive committee of the CML. The second reason that I have is that part of CML's objective is to work with the state government to advance local interests. That includes the governor, that includes the General Assembly. Mr. Ott has several times at our board meetings and other forums taken a very vocal position in favor of the Recall Governor Polis movement. I find it hard to believe that that would be a great position for a member of the CML Executive Committee to have as we move forward into the next several years, having to work with the state government. And so for those two big reasons, and particular emphasis on Senate Bill 181 and his position that I think was adverse to our interests and adverse to the position of our board, I'm not willing to support his nomination to the executive board. Does anyone else have any comments? Trustee Counterman.
I was wondering if Mr. Ott could express his thoughts on your comments, if he could, if he truly believes in those statements that he made, if he has any flexibility in understanding our point of view and not nominating him for those reasons.
When the votes came down to it, I voted the way the town wanted to. I didn't keep my mouth shut, I don't agree with it, but I did vote at the committee the way the town wanted to. I will say that in my defense. I voted for the approval of 181, the CML committee's approval of it. I didn't like it, but I voted for it, because that's what the board wanted. And I'm still against it. I think it's gonna destroy the oil and gas industry if certain people get their way. And as far as the governor, I have no support for him, and I'll make that completely clear, I have no support for him.
Thank you.
Brock.
I have to say, Mr. Trustee Ott, that, voting the way the town wanted you to vote, even though you felt different to that, is somewhat admirable. Sometimes I know at DRCOG, they had 17 different state bills that were coming up, and they were asking for positions from every town that was there representing. When I come here and mention 17 different state bills, I get very little interest. Sometimes it's pretty hard to go back to DRCOG and say, the town completely supports this, the town completely against it, they're against that. And sometimes in your due diligence or your duties as a CML executor, sometimes you're gonna have to vote just for what you feel the general population and what is best for the state and all the people is. And like I say, whether it's your opinion or not. So I just wanted to put that in. Sometimes it's hard to go to these meetings with little support from home. Thank you.
Anyone else? Trustee Doherty.
I guess I have a couple of things. I guess I would partially disagree with what Trustee Scott said. That position is to represent the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees on that committee. And I understand that we are then representatives of the town, but it is not that position to purely be the representative of the town. It is being a representative of the Board of Trustees. So I think that if there's an issue that comes up that's uncertain on where the board is, I think that's an absolutely acceptable vote, is basically either A, abstaining, or having a no, or a not a no vote, I'm thinking of the term, a present vote, where it's not a yes or a no. I don't think it should go down to your opinion. You are there, and this is for any position that we appoint to any of the other items, through DRCOG or any of those. That person is there to represent the board. And I think that's what needs to happen. So if there's an item that comes up that you're unsure of, I think you should vote present. And regardless of your feelings, if you think it's the worst decision in the world for the state or for the town, but the town is, the board is in support of it, you are to vote in support of it. That's your role in that, is to represent the Board of Trustees for this town. So I think that's needed. And I guess I have maybe a couple of questions for Trustee Ott. So when these votes came up, were you aware of these on the docket ahead of time?
No, I just give you the agenda a couple days before we announced it.
Okay, that's what I kind of figured. Okay, thanks.
Jeffrey?
I don't know enough about CML yet, through the research I've done, to know like what the requirements are to be on executive board. I mean, I know there was a little blip about it in our most recent newsletter, or to know whether or not Mayor Pro Tem Ott is qualified. I think a concern for me is, even though we are entitled outside of our role as a town trustee to have a personal opinion and a political opinion, there was a recent post on Nextdoor where there's a number of our constituents that don't feel he followed through on a request he offered, like for people to sign a petition. And I have a concern about that lack of follow through, whether it was in a personal frame or in our frame as a trustee. Like we have to be people of integrity and hold up to our word, because we're in the public eye whether we want to be or not. And I just would want to have some reassurance and know that, you know, he would be able to follow through and fulfill the roles and responsibilities of being on the executive board before I felt like I could support it.
Jack?
I just wanted to say that when I voted CML, it's what the board wants. It's what's best for the town or our citizens. It's not what I want. So if there was a misunderstanding of that, I apologize. I certainly don't need to be castigated for my attendance at Dr. Cog, so thank you.
Okay, I understand what you were talking about, and that the petitions cannot be circulated till either July. There's a 6-month cooling off period, and I called 3 of the people that asked to sign the petitions and explained to them that I can't start circulating petitions, so I think it's June 6th or June 9th, whatever the 6-month anniversary is of the inauguration. You cannot do anything with those petitions until then. They can't even be out there.
Anyone else? And I would just, I kind of wanted to build upon what I was saying earlier. My biggest concern remains Senate Bill 181. It could not have been clearer the message from this board and all of our conversations about oil and gas over the past 2 years. At least 3 of us, and probably more, vocally, a number of times said we wanted more local control over these issues so that we could have better control over what was happening in our backyard. Nonetheless, Trustee Ott went to the CML meetings and vocally stated his personal opposition to 181, when it could not have been clearer that this board probably and almost certainly would have been fully in favor of that bill. And that I just cannot, in good conscience, support putting Trustee Ott in the executive committee of the CML, knowing that he took such a position so opposed to where this board stood. And with that, I will take any more comments, or I will entertain a motion. Do we have a motion? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item, which is introduction opportunity for Martin and Martin. I think Mr. Stamey wanted to introduce them.
I just thought it would be nice for them to do a brief introduction of who they are and kind of your
Sorry you guys have to follow that. That was probably the most
gonna
contentious
say.
thing we've had in several months, so.
You're okay? Yeah. My name's Bill Willis. I'm a principal with Martin Martin in our infrastructure group. We just wanted to come up and let you see a couple faces that you'll be seeing more regularly. We'll be helping out David and Steve, and we really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
And I'm Mark Thornborough, also principal with Martin & Martin. I've been there 21 years. I think Bill's working on his 35th year. We have a broad range of expertise to help the town with, and we're really looking forward to this project.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the discussion item A, alluvial water level update. Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you. For the record, Chris Sanchez with Bishop Brogdon Associates. First, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Tara Meininger. Tara does a lot of work for the town, and I asked her to show up today to show her face to the board. We're not invoicing for her time here today, but I just wanted an opportunity here for an introduction. Regarding water levels, we were asked to provide a quick update regarding the status of alluvial water levels in the key monitoring wells that the town uses to monitor and measure impacts resulting from the upstream East Cherry Creek Valley Water and Sanitation District well pumping. Want to call your attention to the map that's in your packet. The map shows in blue the location of the town's alluvial wells. The wells that we actually rely on for our potable purposes are labeled as wells 1 and 2, and the others are the decreed well sites. Well number 6 is also online and used for irrigation purposes. The green diamonds on this map are the location of the ECC and Aqua alluvial wells that sit up gradient from the town. The direction of groundwater flow on this map is from south to north. So these up gradient green diamonds get the first crack at the water, if you will, before it reaches the town's wells. Up above here, just on the edge of the map, is Bar Lake. That's a lot of the source water for these alluvial wells as the water moves towards the north. The wells in question are shown here as red dots, the TW 11, 13, and 14 wells, and those are the key monitoring wells here that we're discussing. I want to provide you some context about the purpose of these wells and how this functions. Back in 2010, 2011 timeframe, ECCV and Aqua filed for a bunch of wells to pump significant quantities of water out of the alluvial aquifer. Their first step was on the order of, I think it was 200 acre feet, and then they achieved a pumping limit of 6,700 and change acre feet that they could pump from the aquifer, with the ability to pump even more in subsequent court cases. We were concerned about that pumping impact and the resulting impact that it could have on the town's wells. And hand in hand with Steve, we negotiated a stipulation in an initial case, which then carried into future cases, certain actions that would occur if the water levels in the wells reached certain groundwater elevations. We identified trigger levels in these monitoring wells, and we identified kind of a early warning system, levels that were 5 feet above those trigger levels. If the water levels got down to those trigger levels, ECCV and United and Aqua had to either curtail their pumping, move the location of their pumping in a way that might be more protective of the alluvial water levels, or they could recharge more water. They know already that the amounts of water that they intend to pump exceed the capabilities of the aquifer, and as a result, they need to recharge more water into the aquifer just to supplement their own pumping. That's the big picture context of what this is all about. So the graph in the packet shows the trends of water levels in the alluvial wells and the well pumping. The top graph shown with the blue diamonds is the annual pumping amounts by ECCV and Aqua. Notice it's an increasing pumping trend, getting up to about 6,200 acre feet per year. In the red squares, that's the amount of water that they have recharged into the aquifer. Note that their pumping is increasing more quickly than their recharge, because one of the things that they're struggling with is getting enough recharge water into the aquifer. So we've got a trend of increasing pumping, and then working our way down the three graphs here, we're showing the water levels in the TW 11, 13, and 14 wells. What these graphs tell me is that the water levels in these wells respond to the pumping by ECCV and United, and correspondingly drop with that stress of pumping in the aquifer. At the same time, the town's pumping is increasing as well, but at a significantly lesser amount. So, I mean, I don't want to give you the impression that, you know, the town doesn't contribute to this downward trend of water levels as well. You may look at this graph and interpret it to be just a downward trend of water level in the aquifer. I don't quite look at it that way. When I look at this graph, I see the water levels responding to the increasing pumping amounts. So to the extent that ECCV continues to increase their pumping at a similar rate, it's our expectation that the water levels will probably continue to decline at a similar rate. But if, for example, their pumping stabilizes, it would be my expectation to see these water levels stabilize. Now, I will point out that last year, we're getting down closer to the early warning levels, but we're still, 9 feet or so, in some cases above the trigger water levels. One of the services that we provide for the town is keeping an eye on these things, and certainly when it comes into the peak of the irrigation season, say for example that we're moving into now, you bet we're gonna be keeping an eye on this, exchanging information with ECCV and Aqua, and making sure that we're communicating if we see those water levels getting down to a concerning level. We're also grappling with some land use issues here nearby. With a new roadway construction, we had to raise the elevations on one of the wells that was kind of at the location of some of the upcoming grading. We got that done, and I think that's all fine. I got notice today that the TW14 well may interfere with a gas line that's going in. So I'll be in communication with ECCV's hydrologists to make sure that we're managing that situation, and if that well needs to shift one way or another, then there may be some science that needs to be done in order to make that well continue to function as we need it to function. So we, in a nutshell, see a system that we need to continue to monitor, but not real alarming trends. Something else that I wanted to point out is that once their pumping reaches 6,700 acre feet, that kicks off a 5-year period during which we will monitor the system in some level of detail, and after that 5-year period has come and gone, we've agreed to work with them to study the system in some detail to continue to decide essentially what needs to occur moving forward, whether or not more monitoring needs to occur, whether or not their pumping needs to be reduced or what have you. With that, I'll entertain any questions that the board may have.
Mr. Strack?
I appreciate you doing this again, and I agree that we need to kind of look at it every year, and it does, everything does line up with their pumping. And, but to me, it's like you also said, the momentum, it seems to be going down, down, down. guess we'll just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we will definitely be monitoring it closely, especially now that we're launching into the irrigation season. It's a relatively wet year, so hopefully that provides a little bit more robust recharge to the system. And my hope is that this year we won't see water levels as deep as they were this last year. But of course, that's gonna also depend on their well pumping. So.
And off the record, did you mention once that they were thinking about putting maybe 14 wells north of us in this aquifer? And if so, is that going to, will that affect us?
They submitted an application that did indeed include alluvial wells north of the town and east of the town. There were some significant flaws with that application, and Mr. Jeffers raised some flags with them as well as some others, and I think they realized that they did some things wrong, and they've essentially withdrawn that application. Steve, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Their application was actually dismissed on a motion by FRICO. And I meant to send that order to Steve and Maureen, and I did not. I did send it to Chris, and I can give you a little more information about that if you'd like.
But as it stands right now, that application is off the table. I would not be surprised if we saw something like that come forward again. Well, they've got a total of 3 recharge structures that they're trying to operate now, and they have not been successful as getting as much water into those structures as they would like to. And the water that they're putting into those structures is water coming out of irrigation ditches down below Bar Lake. So it's something that they continue to work on. The agreement is that, well, at least the agreement that they have with the town, is that if the water levels get down to one of these concerning levels, then one of the remedies that they have available is to recharge more water to help control those water level drawdowns.
And then in TW14, you said that well may interfere with the gas line. So I'm a little curious on why something that's already there can interfere with something that's a future thing. Yeah, I guess I just don't understand that. It's already there. Why would they not include the gas line if it's not there?
I don't have a good answer for you on that. That opportunity may exist, but again, I just got word on that issue today, so I'll be seeking to learn more about it, and I would suggest that that's certainly one of the options. If it's not an option, and we need to move the TW14 well, say, north or south, or some other direction, then I think that's something that we could do as well. There's just some, groundwater science that will need to be done to correlate water levels in this well and the historical record to some future location, because the elevations are not necessarily going to be one and the same.
And then my last question, kind of my own understanding and curiosity, what is the TW14 at?
It's a good question. I think it's just in a different aquifer sand channel. I think it monitors a part of the aquifer that's a little bit disconnected from the ECCV and aqua wells. The aquifer consists of sand and gravel channels that were put down by the old South Platte River. This used to be the location of, the South Platte River before it shifted to its current channel back in the Ice Age. Yeah, seriously, when there were mammoths going around and that sort of thing. But I think, I've always interpreted this to be that this well just samples a different gravel channel that's not as directly impacted by those wells.
I was just wondering, with all the moisture we've gotten this past winter season, is that gonna benefit us in any way as far as our water storage goes?
We sure hope it will, and it already is. We've had a nice window of free river conditions during which we've been able to put a bunch of water into storage, and that's been very beneficial to the town. Our alternative would have been to pump the Bell Mountain wells out in Douglas County to a cost of, Tara, what, about $60,000 that would have cost us to pump those wells or so? Okay, so maybe it would be something slightly lesser than that. So we were already seeing the benefits of the relatively wet conditions, and moving into the runoff season, it's my hope and expectation that we'll have more of those water opportunities to keep topping off our storage vessel, which is how we like to operate. I mean, the more water we have in storage, the better as we look into the next, say, 6 to 18 months. And
Thank you.
that.
So I guess kind of piggybacking on what Trustee Conrad said, is the town taking any positions right now, can we take any positions that will put us in a good position for potentially a lot of river water this year from runoff, that we can potentially capture some of that? Are there things that we can do to make sure that we have storage capacity in 3 months from now or 4 months from now, when we start to see larger than expected flows where there might be some river water that we can capture?
Yes, and two primary things come to mind. One is making sure that we have access to the maximum amount of storage that the town has available to us. For example, we have bumped into a constraint this year in that the other partners in the United Reservoir facility, there's a constraint in the actual storage level of the reservoir that caused us to not fill quite the total amount of storage in United Reservoir. That's something we continue to work on with them. One way to look at that is someone else may be occupying our storage space, but we haven't worried about that too much yet because we anticipate still having these free river windows to top it off. So one, we need to make sure that we have access to our storage space, but the other thing is just continue to monitor the free river conditions or the in priority conditions during which we can actually fill that bucket. That's something that Tara watches like a hawk. So we look for those opportunities to store water, but at the end of the day, our bucket is only so big. And, we work hard to keep it full, and that's probably the best that we can do, other than demand management and making sure that we're not using too much water in the town. Looking out for leaks and that sort of thing, and I think that the town does a good job of that. So,
Very much.
thank you.
Discussion item B, the Adams County Fair Parade. So Adams County sent an email, and I don't know if they copied Steve or not, I got it, about the upcoming fair parade. Trustee Strzok and I walked in it last year behind a banner that said Lockbuoy. I wanted to see if members of the board are interested in walking in that this year. It is July 27th, 2019, and it's in the early morning hours. So is the board interested in walking in it, I guess is my question, and if so, do we want to try and get like a town truck or something behind us, which some of the cities did last year? Comments or thoughts from anyone? Everyone's checking calendars, it looks like.
I guess I was wondering, is it worth walking in? I mean, did you see any benefit from that, or did you feel good about it?
Yes, it was nice. I mean, all of the Adams County towns were there, and so you kind of got to wave and do that little thing.
I wish I had a bucket of candy,
Yes,
throw it out at all the kids and stuff.
that's kind of the feedback I'm looking for. Is do we want to do something like that this year?
Certainly, candy bars.
I'd be
Sounds-
interested.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would be interested.
Sounds like I should tell them we're interested. Yeah, Trustee Jeffrey?
You know what time for sure? I know you said early morning hours. I have something on my schedule for, Yeah, I might not be able to attend, but I will try. I think we should.
I will sign us up and tell them we're interested in doing something, and then I can work with Steve to see if we want to do something more than just us walking. Okay.
Get some candy.
And then dovetailing on that before we move on, the Southeast Weld Parade, which I don't think we've ever participated in, but we could. It looks like it's gonna be August 10th, and it's a similar thing, much shorter. I think it's only about an hour long for theirs. Would the board also be interested in talking to them about that? Okay, I will follow up on that. Okay, the next item was discussion item C, ordinance 2019-641. Mr.
This ordinance was also on our agenda a couple of weeks ago, and the essence of this ordinance is, it started off, frankly, as an ordinance to prohibit obstructions of the right-of-way. And if you recall, we talked about things like dumpsters, landscape material, portable toilets, and storage pods. We had language in there particularly, and we had some conversations about wanting a 72-hour sort of a grace period. And so I've made some changes to this ordinance, and I still want to discuss it with you tonight. It's on the agenda later this evening for action. If we're ready to take action, that'll be great. If not, that's okay too. I want to make sure we get this right. So the first section of this ordinance sets forth definitions of things like what are landscaping materials and what are storage pods. 11.4.20, which is on page 3 of this ordinance, makes it unlawful for you to basically stockpile or place on any public property, so city property, including right-of-way, any articles of construction materials, landscape materials, anything like that, unless you're an employee or contractor of the town acting within your municipal function. But then subsection 2 has an exception for political subdivisions, special districts, or governmental entities. And subsection 3 has an exception for lawfully parked vehicles, so you're allowed to park your vehicle lawfully on public right-of-way if it's lawfully parked. And then we had in there a exception for trash containers with a 24-hour period. But then I went back and looked at our trash ordinance, and our current ordinance specifically does not allow the placement of any trash containers in the public right-of-way. I don't know how realistic that is in town, frankly. I have to sneeze, so I apologize. Oh,
Like, what am I?
I'm looking at the light. My mother taught me to look at the light. You are the light. So it went away. Sorry about that. Excuse me. So I guess I want to talk with you a little bit about that before we finalize this ordinance, first of all. Current law in town is no trash containers on the street. Okay. So if that's true, then what we can do is remove that section of the code that talks about no trash containers on the public right-of-way, and instead put this section in the code that talks about obstructing right-of-way and say, your only thing you're allowed to put on there is things that are out for trash collection. And what the language suggested here is doesn't exceed 24 hours in duration. Now, just interestingly, so let me back up on myself. I'm confused on this, actually. Current law says, refuse and recycling containers shall be kept off the street, curb, sidewalk, and all public ways and concealed from public view, except for the period 7 p.m. on the evening before and 7 a.m. on the day following. So that's actually a 36-hour period. And yet this ordinance was conflicting because it said a 24-hour period. I guess we need to decide what we want to do about trash containers on the street.
Time period?
Yes. I guess the time period, if what you're telling me is that Waste Management says you got to put them on the street, and we're willing to allow them to go on the street, then do you want them on the street just the evening before and give people the full next day until the next morning to take them in? So the 36 hours, basically what the current law says, and not what this proposed language was in here. Okay, got it.
We just passed that one,
The
the
7
time
p.m.
frame,
to
that was just
7
like
a.m.
last year or something.
Okay. There's also an exception for dumpsters, landscape material, storage pods, and portable toilets temporarily placed on public property, abutting residentially zoned property, placed by the owner or the tenant of such private property. So you'd have to put it only on abutting property. So you're not allowed to put your dumpster across the street in front of your neighbor's house if you're doing a construction project in your house under this provision. It says, if no alternative location is available on the private property at which such dumpster, landscape material, storage pod, and/or portable toilet is in service, and if such dumpster, landscape material, storage pod, and portable toilet is in active use and for a period of no greater than 72 hours, unless they come in and get a permit here, which is kind of a tweak from the language we talked about the last time, because it does require that you're allowed to have it for 72 hours, and we're not gonna question it, we're not gonna make you come into the town hall and get a permit, but you're not allowed to have it just sit there. You're supposed to put it in there and be working on it. You emptying out your garage, or putting in your landscaping, or doing some construction project. So I just wanna make sure you're clear with all that. These are the types of ordinances that draw the biggest public outcry, and that's why I really wanna make sure we walk through them. Okay. And also only if all the location restrictions set forth in subsection D are met, which actually needs to be changed to C, since we've taken out that trash language. And that is that all items and structures otherwise permitted within the public right-of-way, here's the location restrictions. The location must not block travel lanes or interrupt the flow of vehicular and/or pedestrian traffic, taking into consideration any right to lawful parking across the right-of-way. So if somebody can lawfully park, you can't obstruct their ability to also lawfully park. Must not interfere with the public's normal use of the property, cannot interfere with any lawfully existing structure on the property, on the public property, and can't occupy more than 1/5 of the width of any paved sidewalk. So you can place your dumpster somewhat on the sidewalk on your property. In other words, you can obstruct the sidewalk a little bit, but not more than 1/5 of the width of the sidewalk.
Can you clarify, you said it can't obstruct places people could park?
Correct. Must not block travel lanes, interrupt flow of traffic, it's taking into consideration lawful parking. So people are gonna park, and you just need to make sure you recognize that people are gonna park, and so wherever you place your landscape materials or dumpsters, recognize that people are also gonna park. You can't obstruct, that combined can't obstruct traffic on the right-of-way.
Yeah, I'm totally confused. So, like, I can't put my dumpster along the side of the street where cars park normally. I can or can't.
That seems like that's where you want them to put it.
Exactly.
Not across the street. If there's a no parking across the street, you don't want them to put it there, because that's actually a lane of traffic. See, but by putting it where
No, what this says is taking into consideration any right to lawful parking across the right-of-way. So if somebody can lawfully park their vehicle across the right-of-way, and you put your pile of, or your dumpster on your side of the right-of-way, if that obstructs the traffic lanes, even if the vehicle's not there but could park there later tonight, if you put your dumpster in the right-of-way on your side of the street, knowing that they could park a car lawfully across the street, and that makes too narrow of a width for traffic, that's what that means.
I think that's confusing in the sense that, so if there's no parking on the one side of the road, right, then that all the way to the curb is a lane of travel. So you wouldn't be able to put anything there anyway, because that's a travel lane. So it seems like we're creating,
Well, we
creating
would
language.
allow them to narrow travel lanes if we allow them to put dumpsters in front of their property and/or landscape materials. Otherwise, any people in neighborhoods where there's only parking on one side of the street
Only
wouldn't
be
have
able to
any
put it
right
across
to
the
put
street.
anything in front of their property.
but that is a lane of travel. Currently it is. If somebody's parked in the parking area,
It's not an extra wide lane of travel where you can,
no, that's why there's parking only on one side, because there's
but do
only
you
a
really
two-lane
want,
traffic.
if in a neighborhood, somebody can lawfully park, if that's the house over there, and they can lawfully park here, you're saying to me that I can never put a dumpster in front of my property, but they could.
Well, if you can't park there, why could you put a dumpster there?
Policy decision. I mean, I hear, it makes sense, but
I mean, I don't like it either, and I'd hate to be that person on that side of the street. But if you tell me I can't park my car here, and you tell my neighbor they can put a dumpster there, that doesn't flow right.
This policy question is the concern I raised last meeting.
It's exactly the same, discussion.
I think you need to stipulate that it needs to be on their property, because there's plenty of room. If they have a driveway, they can put the dumpster either, or the pot on their driveway. They don't have to put it on the street.
Well, we already do have a provision in here that says you're only ever allowed to park it in the public right-of-way if there's no alternative location available on the private property.
Do we have any private property where there's not a place to park a pod or a dumpster? Because I think everyone has a driveway or a space off the road.
Might be using it to park.
Well, they can park their car on the street, but they should have their dumpster or their pod in their driveway on their private property. And I think that's how it needs to be stated.
So that's fine if that's the policy decision, but that's different than where we ended up at the last meeting. Because at the last meeting, we were going to allow placement of some of these sometimes in the public right-of-way.
Well, I wasn't at the last meeting, but this is my feeling about it. And this is what I've seen in other communities. And this is what I've seen on other boards that I've been on also. That people have space on their private property to put a pod or a dumpster, et cetera, then they can put it on their property. Because the street is public property. You can park anywhere on the street you want. But you can't go put a dumpster down in front of Bob's house 4 doors down from you on the street. That doesn't even make sense.
So some communities do allow that, and just to be sure. But I think that I completely understand where you're coming from also.
There are some driveways in Bella Vista that are pitched in such a way that you cannot put a pod on them. And so I think the provision in like in front of your house, like directly adjacent to your property, if you cannot put it on your property, is appropriate.
Similar to last meeting. Parking's limited, so we have quite a few cul-de-sacs that are curves, and if it's wider at that location, I think we should consider having that allowed in kind of those wider areas where it's not really part of the lane. So maybe that's too difficult to do, but.
Are you saying that the language that would require you to put the dumpster only in front of your property, we should take out? Because if you live in a community where you can't put one in front of your property because it would obstruct a traffic lane, for instance, Berkshire, let's just use that as an example, right? Then you should be able to put the dumpster across the street in front of your neighbor's house.
Right, I would agree with that. I guess my thinking of this is, especially since we have a limitation of the 72 hours, it's a little different than a car. But I could park my car 5 houses down from mine, because that's the open parking spot, because as you mentioned last time, in the last meeting, it's basically open parking. And so there's no way for us to regulate if I have 5 cars parked along the street somewhere versus just one versus none. It's basically free-for-all parking because it's public. And I think that should be the same thing for this. This is public, and if I need to put my pod that's a few houses down, it's gonna suck for me to unload it, but I still think it's safer than obstructing
Can't be chalking, no, we don't chalk anyway.
So, you know, so I actually think it's better in the long run to push it to parking and not restrict lanes of travel.
I disagree with that 100%. I think if you live in this house and you have a pod or a dumpster and you park at 5 houses down in front of Bob, I think Bob's gonna get pissed off. I think he's really gonna get pissed off about that. I think it's a lot different than a car. And I would recommend that we put language in there that says it needs to either be on your own private property or in front of your house, period.
But what about the situation Jamie brought up where you might not be able to put it in front of your house or in your driveway?
I thought she said the driveway was at a slant where it couldn't be put in, but did you say in front of the house?
You only have one side
We have two side parking, but even so, like, you could have that issue in Berkshire where you only have one side of the street parking. I think it goes back, sorry, maybe. I think it goes back to, we're talking about 72 hours. We're talking about a very short period of time. And I think that if they're going to need to come and get a permit for an extended period of time, those are all questions that can be asked in that moment. Like, why isn't it here? Oh, it's there. Have you spoken with your neighbor across the street, since that's where a parking spot is? You know, I think we're digging a little bit too deep.
Ready?
I guess my one maybe last thought is I think Bob would much rather recommend or rather have a pod in front of his house for 72 hours and his house burned down because a fire truck couldn't get to it because you blocked the lane of traffic and they couldn't turn.
Trustee Conerman?
I'm also concerned about the time element, 36 hours. I don't know anyone that I know of that's moved into as a new resident and had a pod delivered to their house with all their belongings in it and necessarily been able to unload that into their new home and get that all organized within 72 hours. I think that time limit needs to be extended to pods.
Yeah, so what the ordinance says is you can do it for 72 hours without coming to town hall. If it's gonna go beyond 72 hours, you need to come to town hall, tell us why you need more than 72 hours, how much time you need, where you're gonna have it, and for what purpose, and they'll issue a permit for an extended amount of time.
That's however much time they need or want.
Yeah, some reasonable amount of time.
All right.
So one of the reasons we talked about the aggregate, not like landscape material being put on the public roadway, you were talking about how you shouldn't allow that at all, right? It should go on their driveway. Some aggregate companies won't dump aggregate on your driveway. When you go get 3/4-inch rock to do your landscaping, they will not dump it on your lawn, on your driveway because they don't want to crack your driveway and be responsible to replace it. That's what we talked about last time. So that was one of the reasons why we included that in this, was you put it, so, but I think that if we're talking about one side of the road, this side of the road, in front of your house, wherever it is, I think it's easy just to specify it must be placed in an area that's legal to park in, right? Whether you say it has to be in front of your house or wherever it can be, it just can't be in a lane of traffic. It can be in a place that's legal to park in, if that makes sense. Yep.
It does make sense, but I guess trustee Counterman's position is you're gonna make Bob angry down the street.
I don't think I would want my pod 5 houses down. I would really try to want to put it closer to my house as possible, right? So I would try to work with my neighbors to make sure I could do that.
Clear as mud.
And I think everybody's going to be upset if you leave it there for very long, because whoever it is lost their parking spot.
What are the things you need
Well, I
consensus
think
from us?
I think
Trustee.
what I'm hearing is, for sure, no obstructing of traffic, so I get that. Never in a travel lane. I thought we had that clear, but maybe it wasn't clear. I think the question then is, must it be abutting your property or not? And that's where I'm hearing a little bit of varying views. Or as the chief suggests, you can put it anywhere, just in a lawful parking spot. For 72 hours.
Trustee Connerman's
Longer.
position, trustee Strack.
That was my position, was that the placement should be in a legitimate parking space.
I think that I share that position, as long as it's a, authorized parking space, 72 hours. Trustee, Trustee Ott,
Yeah, I agree, as long as it's a legitimate parking space.
and that was your position, and trustee Jeffrey agrees, so I think that's your consensus.
I don't think this is ready for action tonight. I need to go back and rework this. Sorry.
Got the consensus. Next item on the agenda was the action item, which we are gonna table for now till Mr. Ron can make the relevant changes. So the next item is staff comments. Ms. Blackston.
Give you an update on the website. So if you've been on the website recently, we are working on it, but when we first took over from Civics Plus, we had like a temporary design. The one we have now is now the permanent design. So we're getting, we still have some work to do, but just wanted to let you know that that's the permanent design, and staff continues to work on it as time allows. Then I did ask some of you who had books to bring them in, and the reason for that is we did get codified the land use code. So it is now our code up until the last, I think, 3 ordinances, it is now current. So the land use code is now chapter 19, and it's on the website. It's searchable. We had it on there before, but it's as a PDF and pretty hard to search, but now it's part of our municipal code, so and so if you have your books, please bring them. We got the papers to switch them out. I know you don't have one, but anybody who does have one, please bring them. We'll get them switched out and get them back to you. So then you'll be current. But now you can go to the website and look stuff up, and everything's good. Just start that next supplement, but I wanted to get all that stuff done first. So that's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Stamey?
Just a couple of brief things. Top of the report, we had a question last week or last meeting about participation in the rec center, so those numbers are provided. And just a rough guess, the Brighton is probably 126 individuals, the Fort Lupton is probably 114. Or 14.
Okay, what was that number again?
126 in Brighton, 14 in Fort Lupton. Just by looking at adult, couple, family, and senior numbers.
Brighton, we only pay for use, so that one didn't bother me as much, but what was our base rate for Fort Lupton? Was it like 1,000 or something?
I'd have to go back and look at that agreement. We haven't received a billing from them yet for this year, for 2019. It was a quarterly billing. It was, what, 300 and some a quarter or something like that? I'd have to go back and look at that agreement.
That one was the only one that concerned me a little.
You know, I had a question on that too. According to the numbers that you gave us, we basically saved the citizens going to Brighton $5,280. And then the ones going to the other was about, less than $500. It might be more with the 14 people. It says, so I guess that was my question. Are we spending, $10,000 to let our citizens go there when we're only actually saving $5,200? The savings was $5,200. Are we spending that much to go to the Brighton Rec Center?
Brighton just bills us that difference.
It's that exact number.
All right, I get it. Thank you.
So the other, just quick update, Silver Peaks East, I mentioned there was going to be some changes occurring with that. That number, it looks like now about 45 lots will be removed from their plat that we looked at here a few months ago. The Lockbuoy Center and Station property, we've approved the 7-Eleven site plan. I think now with the approvals of the Lockbuoy Station, ratification of that, re-ratification of that plat, I think now it's up to the applicant, 7-Eleven, to do their final negotiations and closing on that property. And that's moving forward, as I understand, and talking with their team. Then the other item that I had mentioned in my staff report was that we have internally have looked at staff reorganization, both in the police department and services in the town clerk's office as well, which there would be a promotion, the creation of a lieutenant position and a promotion to that position, an internal promotion to a sergeant's position. So there's no additional staff, but just reorganization of positions. And then Debbie would be also assume roles of deputy town clerk. So we're gonna move some office space around as well, so.
Are those done deals with the lieutenant being with the sergeant?
Well,
being-
we anticipate to make that effective the 1st of July in terms of implementation.
There a pay increase with that?
Yes.
How much?
Has an approximate budget impact for 2019 of $12,500. And we can absorb that in our budget based on some vacancies we've had and positions not filled yet this year.
What does that raise, what will be the lieutenant's salary then? And so what will that be? What will the total be?
About 80,000 a year.
80?
It's not mayor, trustee comments, is it?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? The only question I had, Steve, was on the Silver Peaks East, the lots they're not gonna be able to develop. So that's gonna become just open space then?
We've requested they do an amended plat that puts those lots into an open space tract. I've asked them to do a management plan for that open space as well, and they will have some street alignments on that eastern side.
I guess what I'm trying to picture is, by open space, do we just mean it's gonna be wild grass and that kind of thing, or is it gonna be manicured kind of thing?
Well, that's what we've asked them for. We don't want it to be a weed patch, but I've asked them to give us a report on both, kind of weed and vegetation management, as also the, trying to address any of the ponding problems that we've had there in the past.
Mayor? I'm sorry, I want to expand on the salary for the lieutenant. So it's 80,000, but it will be a salary position. It's exempt from overtime, which currently it's not as a sergeant. They do get overtime, so that will make a difference as well in the total cost.
Now, Mayor Trustee comments. Trustee Ketterman.
Comments? Have a moment of silence for the child that died today at the STEM school out in Highlands Ranch. I'd like to suggest that we do that as a tragic event again. Thank you. That's it. No other comments.
Trustee Strap.
Three quick ones. One, I noticed FRICO every spring cleans out those ditches and they burn a lot of the weeds, but they also take all the tumbleweeds and pile them up on the side of the canals, and then they just blow wherever they want. Currently, there's quite a fire hazard behind the mayor's house. There's also quite a fire hazard on the Burling Canal at 4. I believe that citizen's name is Mike. I don't know his last name, but I believe he sent us all an email about the fire thing. Maybe not, but it is a fire hazard if you drive by there. And so my comment would be that maybe FRICO should take some responsibility for removing some of the tumbleweeds. Their ditches catch the tumbleweeds and they just set them up on the bank, they dry, and then blow further down the field. My second comment was, maybe we should consider, hiring another intern or finding a grant, so that we could, add an intern to our staff, kind of like Samantha was, at an assistant administrator level. I think it helps us applying for grants. I think it helps, maybe raise the morale of the people in the office and the staff. My third comment is actually going to be about DRCOG and the benefits and the values that we get from them. I believe the town pays an annual fee of about $800 to be a member of DRCOG, and to date, has paid us almost $2 million to be members and to attend their meetings. I don't see how the town would have gotten money for the lights at the intersections or the trail without DRCOG. And so for an $800 investment, it's quite a deal. So I'm all in favor of that. Thank you.
Trustee Hack.
Couple things from the CML. The family medical leave bill is dead for this session. There was too much opposition, both from businesses, bipartisan opposition, and the municipalities. Mainly it was a bunch of, the bills are written was a bunch of stacking of benefits, which they couldn't go along with. The governor signed the no monetary bail on a municipal violation unless there's a comparable violation in state statute, which means we have no way of enforcing local statutes, unless it has something comparable to state statute. Sports betting is gonna be on the ballot for 2019. In the three current areas we have it, Blackhawk, Central City, and one Colorado Springs. But it's gonna be taxed up to 10% with the revenue going to the state's water plan. Early in the legislature, there was a transportation bill that allocated $11.2 million to earmark for local transportation for local municipalities to use. They have since upped that. They have added another $18 million. So now there's going to be almost $30 million available for local municipalities to use for their transportation costs. I'm not sure how it's going to be allocated, but I'll have to check with Kevin Bomber on that. And the last thing is, it looks like they were gonna put a debrucing measure for transportation on the 2019 ballot. It looks like it's gonna be held over to 2020 because there were some other conflicting bills that would have made it not work on the ballot, so that's all I have.
Trustee Doherty.
I have two things, I only remember one of them. For the construction on Well County Road 2, we at least request that they don't obstruct sightlines. There's a big pile of dirt at the entrance, the east entrance to Berkshire. It makes it difficult to see past, to see oncoming traffic. I know that they may not always have a great spot to put it, but if they can try to avoid putting it in the sightline, that would be appreciated.
And Trustee Jeffrey.
It has been really nice to be part of the library board. I've been to the library a couple of times, and staff that work there have been very nice to me, happy to see me. I was there last week and talked with Terry for quite a while, and the next library board meeting is Wednesday, May 15th. And they're gonna be talking about sort of their vision and strategic plan, and so she asked me to give a special invite to any others of you that might like to join me and see what they're talking about and what they're starting to plan. And then the other thing is just it's really unfortunate that the shooting happened today on the official Teacher Appreciation Day, but this whole week is a celebration of educators and staff members that work at schools. And I would encourage anybody in this room that knows an educator or educator to take that extra time and tell them that they're appreciated. Because in May, when we're down to 2.5 weeks of school left, it means a lot to hear those kudos.
I had a couple quick things. First, I just want to say thank you for the feedback on the parades. I will reach out to Adams County and Southeast Well to see if we can get ourselves signed up. On an upcoming agenda, we're going to discuss the whether we should permit fire pits in town. I've received phone calls and social media messages and emails about this, and confusion about whether they're allowed in town, so we're gonna have a discussion of that. I don't know if it'll be next meeting or the meeting after, but one of the upcoming meetings. Also, I'm planning to host one of my mayor's mingles this summer in one of the town parks, with a barbecue attached to it to try and attract people to come and talk to us. When I get that date set, I'll let you guys know when that date is gonna be and what that event's going to look like. Hopefully, we can get all of us there so that we can chat with the citizens that might be interested in attending. And then the last thing I was wondering is, do we have any update from our library attorneys, Maureen? Next meeting, okay, great. And I did have one more quick thing. We had briefly discussed at a prior board meeting the idea of hosting a Lockbuoy night at the Brighton Oasis. Apparently, they have the opportunity to reserve it for like a personal party, and they said we could reserve that as a town if that's something we're interested in doing. I might mention to Linda that we should bring that as a discussion item at the next meeting, but I just wanted to toss that out there. So think about whether you're in favor of that. I think the cost was fairly minimal, maybe $600 or something like that, but, so. We'll bring that as a discussion item at the next meeting. Other than that, I don't have anything else, so I will entertain a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned at 8:40 p.m.